What's up, Rivalers, and welcome to the Ultimate Invisible Woman Guide. Sue Storm is an amazing healer that can project force fields and has some of the best utility in the game. In this guide, I'll be covering Sue's combos, playstyles, advanced tips, and more. So whether you're a complete beginner or a high-ranking player, this video is for you. Sue is a healing strategist with multiple ways to protect herself and an ultimate that can completely change every single team fight. Her kit is quite simple. Her primary fire is a piercing shot that both heals allies and damages enemies before returning to Sue like a boomerang. Her right click projects a force field shield onto allies, providing anyone on her team with some healing over time. Her shift ability is a vortex that continuously damages enemies and sucks them in. Her E ability can either push enemies away or pull them in. Her passive lets her turn completely invisible after being out of combat. She has a double jump, which also turns her invisible. And her ultimate is a massive healing circle, which turns your entire team invisible. So let's go over each ability and teach you how to efficiently use each one. Sue's primary fire is a medium range piercing shot that goes through allies and enemies. The shot also returns to you just like a boomerang, so to get maximum value, you're always going to want to position at the back of your team so that your shots pierce through your team, healing all of them, and those same shots will be hitting enemies as well. These shots can't headshot, so you can spend more of your time focusing on positioning and finding ways to maximize how many heroes these shots are hitting rather than going for precision aiming. One trick to her primary fire is that if you find yourself in a 1v1 scenario, you can fire directly at the enemy's feet instead of through their bodies, and since your shots will be bouncing off the ground, both ticks of your damage will be hitting at once for more consistent burst. Sue's right click is this 300 HP shield that you can reposition infinitely if you keep spamming right click. And the shield also gives healing over time and can block entire enemy ultimates. However, you can also recall this ability, which takes the shield entirely, placing it on a cooldown before you can cast it again. This cooldown will be longer the more your shield has been damaged, and it will be extra long if you've let the shield become destroyed. Since this is a targeted ability, it is a perfect tool to heal teammates with high mobility or flyers, since you can just keep spamming the shield on top of them without having to hit your left click shots. This shield also doubles as a miniature portable Doctor Strange shield. I like placing it on top of my DPS, that way they can hold line of sight and keep pressuring enemies without taking damage, which is especially nice for flyers. And if you're low health, you can just plop the shield on one of your teammates in the backline and stand next to it, essentially making it a miniature health pack. So just always try to make sure that you're repositioning your shield and picking it up when you don't need it. That way it can always be at full HP when you do need it. Sue's E ability allows you to either push enemies away or pull them towards you, dealing a bit of damage as well. Your E has some incredible range and it can push and pull multiple enemies. Now this is a wildly powerful tool with tons of different uses. It can be used defensively and offensively. So let's start with some of its defensive uses. You can use it to push melee enemies that are diving you away from you and your team, creating a bit of space so that you can abuse your range advantage. You can interrupt and push back characters that are mid-jump like the Hulk or Venom. You can interrupt combo-dependent heroes like Black Panther and Spider-Man, and pushing enemies away in general is just a very high-value defense tool. But you can also use this E ability to suck enemies into your team. For instance, you can pull an enemy that's a little too separated from their team into your team, creating an easy pick for your team to jump on. Also, if your team has already won a team fight, this is a great tool to pick off and stagger straggling enemies that are trying to run away from your team. Your E ability can also be used in combination with your invisibility, so you can sneak around the map finding a good angle and push or pull enemies into choke points, or just generally into places they don't want to be. For instance, if an enemy Doctor Strange is flying into the air setting up a huge ultimate on your team, and you notice this, you can push him away, putting his flight ability on cooldown and saving your entire team from his ultimate. Sue's shift ability fires out a psionic vortex that creates a field that damages, slows, and sucks enemies towards the center of the vortex. After you shoot this ability, it will continue to fly forever until it collides with an enemy hero or terrain. Now, this ability does really good damage, especially if you can keep enemies in it for the full duration, because it does last several seconds. Try to throw this into choke points, onto contested objectives, and generally just in spaces that enemies are wanting or needing to occupy. Your shift ability can also knock down flyers that are inside the vortex, making it a great anti-air tool as well. Now, of course, the Invisible Woman can go invisible, and she has two ways to activate her stealth. That is going to be double jumping, which will instantly turn you invisible, or being out of combat for a few seconds will also trigger it. While invisible, you will heal over time, so this is a great tool to keep yourself alive if your team's other strategist isn't healing you or has been KO'd. The idea is that if the enemy gets the drop on you, you want to double jump and then disappear to reposition into a safe area or closer to your team. Using any ability or taking any form of damage or crowd control will break your stealth, so you need to be careful where you step and not walk through the line of fire. Also, when you're invisible, the enemies can still hear your footsteps, so sometimes you'll want to stand still when you're invisible, that way you can catch the enemies by surprise or hide without getting caught. Sue's ultimate is a massive circle that heals your team in a huge area. This ability also turns all of your teammates and enemies inside of it invisible to anyone outside of it. This ult also slows any enemies that walk through the barrier of the ultimate, turning them into easy targets if they decide to enter or leave the circle. This is an incredible tool for teamfights, not just for the healing, but also for the fantastic utility that it brings. It makes it so precision-based enemies like Hawkeye and Hela are nearly worthless, since they now can't see who they're firing at to line up headshots. This ultimate really feels like a win teamfight button when used properly. Just make sure you're placing the ult in an area where the teamfight will continue to take place. It's not like Luna Snow's ult where you can pop it and then move with your team into new areas. And Sue's ultimate is an amazing ult to pop as a counter to when the enemy uses ults, and this is primarily how you're going to want to use this ultimate, to survive enemy ults. If the enemy uses Doctor Strange ult, Star-Lord ult, Storm ult, and so many others, you can reactively use the Invisible Woman's ult to safely nullify and survive through multiple enemy ults. It's also great to use as a counter ult against enemy support ults, since if it's popped after theirs, yours will continue healing long after their ults has ended. If enemy ults start getting popped and things are looking ugly, you can make your entire team disappear and turn the teamfight in your favor. Also, if the map changes after you've placed your ultimate, your ult actually moves with the map as well, which I think is a cool interaction, but it can lose you the game if you're not careful. Now let's talk about some of Sue's strengths as a character. Sue's ability to move enemies is incredibly powerful for setting up combos, keeping yourself alive, and disrupting enemy dives, whereas other strategists have to wait until the enemy actually dives them to react with things like Mantis Sleep or Luna Freeze. You can actually disrupt a lot of characters from diving on you in the first place with a well-timed push. There is so much value in the push ability. And Sue's ability to pop out of stealth and use several moves before jumping back into stealth makes you such a nuisance to the enemy. This ultimate really feels like a win teamfight button when used properly. Just make sure you're placing the ult in an area where the teamfight will continue to take place. It's not like Luna Snow's ult where you can pop it and then move with your team into new areas. Now let's talk about some of the weaker areas of playing the Invisible Woman. Sue's healing output can be nice when your whole team is clumped up, but a lot of her healing is gated behind her shield, which can be a little tricky to manage and get the most out of. Because sometimes you'll put the shield down and the fight will just completely move away from that area, which means you're missing out on healing from the shield and the value of the shield itself. It can be tricky to constantly be managing moving your shield as chaotic fights break out and learning to balance plopping the shield down for healing and holding onto it to block key moments like enemy ultimates. Shield definitely has a learning curve, and even when maximized, you can't really match the consistent healing outputs of most strategists. Your healing is good, don't get me wrong, but most of Sue's value comes from her hard and soft forms of crowd control and other forms of utility. Outside of your ultimate, your healing can feel underwhelming, especially if your shield is down or you're missing shots with your primary fire. In addition to this, both of Sue's forms of healing are medium range at most, which means that while you do have the tools to put yourself into dangerous situations and survive, you still need to be putting yourself into dangerous situations to heal your team, as opposed to someone like Loki or Rocket, who have literal infinite range and can heal from across the map. Sue also doesn't have a reliable way to heal herself outside of stealthing, which still isn't super fast and also removes you from any fight, effectively reducing the number of healers your team has by 1. And while she can make use of the healing from the shield, she can't create the shield at all unless she's around a teammate. So Sue is of course an extremely team-reliant character. All in all, Sue is one of the most fun strategist designs in the game, and she has a very high skill ceiling which leaves lots of room for improvement. She brings good damage, she has incredible forms of disengage and survivability, and of course a game-changing ultimate that will win you nearly any team fight and allow you to efficiently counter a ton of enemy ults. Be sure to manage your shield's health bar and cooldowns efficiently, use your stealth to survive and create plays that no other strategist can, and maximize the value of your ultimate by using it after enemy ults have been used. If you follow this advice, you'll be carrying your team to glory in no time. Let me know which character you'd like to see a guide on next, and I will see you in the next one, Rivalers.